I'm James Debbaco.
I'm Martin Leyva.
And I'm Susan Hess. Our Stories Matter podcast was born out of a need for a brave space for people who experience the criminal punishment system to share their truths. This is Our Stories Matter, brought to you by Trauma Informed LA. Our Stories Matter celebrates the complex lived experiences of activists and healers by sharing their inspiring stories. In Season 4 of Our Stories Matter, we will focus on two organizations that are dismantling the 46,000 collateral consequences, Homeboy Industries and Forestry and Fire Recruitment Program.
So welcome today to Our Stories Matter. My name's James Debbaco. I'm the co-host, and with me is Susan Hess and Martin Leyva. Today, our special guest is going to be Damon Cooke. Damon Cooke is the co-founder and chief executive officer for the Uncuffed Project, which is a program that is, I do believe, in Northern California. Is that right, Damon?
Yeah, in Southern as well.
Right. Why don't you go ahead and share with us what the Uncuffed Project is?
Okay. First of all, I'm really honored to be here, and I appreciate you guys inviting me, and this is a wonderful opportunity. The Uncuffed Project, I'm formerly incarcerated. I recently served 32 years in the California prison system. I've been home for about a year. And what I decided to do while in prison was change the narrative and the recidivism rate the best way I knew how. So a couple of things that I did, I would ask the young men when they came back to prison, why did you come back? And then they would give me an answer, and I didn't like the answer because they said they didn't have the opportunity, or they didn't have a way home, or they violated their parole. Really mundane, sorry things they would say. And so I said, wow, we have to change that. And so I got together with the chaplain at the time, and I said, maybe if we created a situation where we can help men and women, when they return, get to their destination, then probably decompress, the likelihood of recidivating, it will be less if we did that first, because the number said 60 to 80% recidivate in the first 60 days. And I was like, oh, what's the problem? What's the disconnect? So that's what happened with me. So I started a nonprofit inside prison, and I started, testing this testing thing with...
Wait. You said you started a nonprofit inside prison.
I did. A 501c3.
Was that difficult? Was that a challenge?
Absolutely.
What goes into starting a nonprofit as a prisoner in prison?
Well, first you have to get past the IRS believing that this narrative that you're doing. So that's why I have a co-founder, Lisa Strong. She's also the chaplain at San Quentin. And so what we did was we put it together, we submitted it, and then about a year and a half later, they said, yeah, we think this is real. So they gave me my nonprofit status, and then we started moving from there. The first thing that I knew, the basic essentials of a person getting out of the institution would be a backpack, a cell phone, and the basic toiletries and essentials a person needs to move forward. A lot of these men and women, when they get out, to put things in perspective, you're given $200 for gate money. And let's say you're in the Bay Area and you live in Southern California. You have to take the $200 and find your way home. And a lot of times people don't have identification. They don't have a means to get home. And now there's a problem because that money runs out very quickly. And so I said, no, that can't be. And so they'll make a bad decision. Oh, I might rob somebody. I need to get home, or I'll violate. And the next thing you know, they're back in prison.
And you talk about the gate money. The ironic thing about that $200 is sometimes it's not even actually $200 because you may have to pay for your clothing, your shoes, your boots, your shirt. And the Department of Corrections charges for somebody that doesn't have those type of things before they're exiting, out of incarceration. So
yes, and remember when you and Martine interviewed Ivy didn't even receive her gate money. So a woman is being released without anything. I mean, nothing, which I think is what comes in with Uncuffed of what you provide. If someone doesn't have the finances, family resources supports, because don't you provide like a 30 days worth?
Yeah, I give you a 30, I pay your phone bill for 30 days, but I give you a 60 to 90 day stipend of food. It doesn't seem like a lot, but to someone getting out, I don't want you spending your gate money on that. I want you to try to reestablish yourself. So that was kind of like what we did. And it just grew from there. I started out giving out backpacks, and now they're duffel bags, right? Because each time that I feel that there's a need, and clothing as well. And you mentioned that you get charged for clothing. I just thought that that was asinine. How are you going to release me back into society and then charge me to give me a pair of pants and they give you a paper suit? It's not even a real piece of clothing.
What do you mean by paper suit?
Yeah, what's a paper suit?
What is that?
It looks like clothing, and it's probably him or something, right?
Wow.
But it's paper.
What? Wait, hold on. They give you clothes that are paper?
Yes.
Yeah.
The fabric is paper? Martine wants to jump in.
No, I have. I've seen those before, and they're awful.
What?
And it says criminal.
Right.
What?
What?
I mean,
Yes.
not literally,
Yes.
But people know.
understand what you're wearing.
Yeah,
Right.
people are going to know
Wow.
if you're wearing clothes that are of paper. You just came out of prison.
Correct.
So they're not the khakis anymore? I remember
It's
when they
paper
were there.
khaki. Yeah.
They're
It's
paper
paper?
khakis.
Yeah, it's tan.
Oh, my
it's
God.
Blonde. It's bland. And when you see it, you go, he just left prison. Or she just left prison. It's
Oh,
terrible.
no.
Terrible. So there's a whole stigma with that, right? And so that's still by design, right? The institutions, they still are archaic, man. This is what they do. They want you to still be branded. And so I essentially said, Uncuffed, that's why that name came about. I want to take the cuffs off your mind, right? Because the physical cuffs are one thing, but the mental ones stay with you for much longer. So when you start that narrative and you start changing it, now the people that are involved in this start to believe that they're human again. And, basically giving their number back is the big deal. Give your CDC number back to the people who's holding you hostage, right? That's my whole thing.
And what is that, though? I mean, what is that for somebody who doesn't really understand giving your number back? What are you talking about? What does that consist of?
Okay, so when you enter into the prison system, you're giving a number. You're given a number. My number is H20151, right? So that number stays with you. I'm no longer Damon Cooke. I'm H20151. In fact, when you get mail inside prison, the officer comes to your door and says, last two
Last two numbers?
of your CDC. Give me your last two.
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't stop, right? Because then you can connect that even to the Holocaust. People still have their numbers.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's basically genocide, and it just continues into contemporary slavery, right?
And I don't think you ever forget your CDCR number or your
No.
CDC number ever.
That's the conditioning, right? That's what they
I've
want
been
you.
home 15 years, and I'm V27.
See?
V93427.
Wow.
Yeah.
See?
Well, I mean, I'm so appreciative, Damon, that you're here. So just for folks at home to know, we invited Damon so that he could be part of the discussion of, is education the great equalizer? And to sort of talk about the season and reflect about the season. And Damon, you didn't also mention that you are a podcaster yourself. He created a podcast when he was inside called Uncuffed.
Yeah. So that was one of the things that, we were fortunate to be involved in. The administration came to me and said, hey, we'd like you guys to tell the story. And then I said, it's kind of difficult when the administration asks you to create a story because now you're on pins and needles. You want to tell the story, but how much liberty do I really have to tell these stories? So they said, no, we're going to give you some rope. We're going to let you do your thing. And I said, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to humanize the condition that I'm in. So the men and women that came in and talked to us and wanted to be interviewed, I talked to them about their experiences, what happened. And so then it became more about the people more so than the condition that they're in.
Does that encompass your segment of it's deeper than?
Yeah, well, that was a poem that I put together during COVID, and I was saying that it's deeper than what people say or how we were looking at it. That was basically inspired by Breonna Taylor and all the people that we experienced during COVID. And if it weren't for the media and the people seeing what was actually happening, to people getting killed on film, Michael Brown, all this Ferguson, I was like, wow, this has to be deeper than just what we see. And so that's why I wrote that poem about it's deeper than. And so I wanted to inspire thought, right? And then thought really provokes action. And when people have action, now we can have movement, right? I need that verb in there. I need you to start moving around and doing something. And the podcast provided that platform for me. So,
when we talk about education, you didn't just wake up in prison and say, hey, I want to, start going to school, right? So do you have a background that is, relative to what you're doing today? And how did you come about, with the mindset of developing the Uncuffed Project?
Okay, so I'll take you back to before prison. Before prison, I went to University of New Mexico. I came back in my third year because my mother was ill. And then I ended up going to prison during that time. So I never finished. But I always had this echo in my mind of my mom saying, you better go back to school. I don't care. You figure it out. But when I went in the institution, they had just taken the Pell Grants. They took everything away from us in terms of how we could pay for our school. So I said, this can't be. We have to do something about it. So they said, okay, if you find a way where we can put this stuff in the prisons, then we'll let you do it. So that's all I needed. That was the little nudge I needed. So I found what they call a BOG waiver. And so I brought it to the academic instructors and supervisor of academic education. And I said, hey, I found a BOG waiver where you guys, the governor, could pay for schooling for even formerly incarcerated or incarcerated.
So you're talking about the Board of Governors fee waiver, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So they said, well, let's see. So I said, well, I tell you what, I have a friend that's at Coastline Community College. I'll reach out to her. So I reached out to her, and she says, I can't believe you're in prison, Damon. I knew her way before, right? We went to high school together. And I said, I saw your name, and your name was so unique. I thought this might be you. And because I went to high school in Orange County, so she said, yeah, it's me. And so she said, yeah, we'll do it. So that's how Coastline got into the California prison system. And then it blossomed from there because I had the academic instructor at that time was at Soledad.
Wait, are you telling me that you pretty much were the one that brought Coastline College into the Department of Corrections?
Absolutely.
I'm an alumni of Coastline College because of that.
That's what I'm talking about.
Wow, that is awesome.
Yeah.
So I would have never have thought of that.
That's how that developed. And then we sent out the information to all the prisons, women, men, 36 at the time. There's 36 prisons in California. So then that's when it got everywhere because what will happen is someone that is, say you're taking classes at Soledad and then all of a sudden you get transferred. That's a problem because now you're saying, I left all my books at this, right?
Right.
So that's why I told the academic instructor, it's best that it's in every prison. So if I transfer, I can continue my education.
And just to touch upon that, because for those that don't know, it's not sitting in front of a computer, at Coastline Community College. It's actually watching videos on prison telecommunication systems at odd hours of the day to try to catch up with lessons and try to catch up with your instructors, So it's not an easy program.
No.
So talk about that.
Well, I said that when I wrote the dean at Coastline, I said, you have to be flexible in this process because lockdowns occur. That's when they lock the prisons down. So we're not going to have access to education. And as you pointed out, I need to keep up with, because the professors don't care about the deadline, right? They said you have to have your paper in by then. But if I'm locked in my cell and I don't have access to getting the typewriters at that time, because they weren't really computers. And so you type in old school, you're on a typewriter.
ML500.
That's the one, the brother. So brother, ML500 is a model of a typewriter that anyone in prison that has been typing for a while, that is your savior. That's your saving grace. Because that typewriter has a memory and you can type and you can put your documents to get them together. So that was one of the things so we just talk about, I always look for the pain points, right? Because this is how you find the solution. So if I find the pain within the community, then I can look for the solution. And I'm not really going to complain about it. I'm just going to try to find the solution. So that's really where I come from in that process.
And I'm curious with Martin. Martin, can you talk about your experience when you were inside around education, and then what you're doing now on the outside?
Yeah, of course. I think I love Damon's story, but unfortunately it didn't equate to me. I was active and I asked the wrong person if I can go to school. Obviously, because I was active, they said no, and I didn't care to check it out, right? But I still got educated, and this is what I'm writing about now: Cellblock intellectualism.
Ooh, wow. I love that title. I
had I'm Chicano, right? But I had a native black brother, Crip, gave me Pedagogy of the Press. First book I ever read in prison. I didn't have a professor. I didn't have a classroom. I didn't have anything traditional. I was informal, cellblock intellectualism. One of my elders, this black dude named Squeaks, they were educating me. And that's my education in prison. I wasn't afforded education. Why? Because I don't know, And so now out here, associate's degree, bachelor's degree, master's degree. I'm a professor at a university and close to my doctorate degree. And I go back to prison and I thank the Cellblock intellectuals who put me in the place where I'm at.
Wow.
So.
And where are you a professor at now again?
Cal State San Marcos in North County, San Diego, and getting my doctorate from UC San Diego.
Amazing.
That's impressive.
Nice.
That's
I just want to chime back in with what you said. You said you're active, and for the people who are listening and don't understand what active is inside the institution, would you explain what active prisoner means?
I'm Native American, small group of people inside the prison system, and I was involved with protecting my people. But I was active with them. I had to do what I had to do to protect them, be protected.
Right. So I appreciate that. So if I could I'm going to try to bring this in because I just had a thought right now. How we all got here today with this intersection, right? We all come from different backgrounds, ethnic and social economic backgrounds, but we're all here today talking about a commonality, which is education, right? The formerly incarcerated. And I just appreciate the platform. So I would like to ask Susie, right, if she could tell us how she got involved in this.
Now, that's a good question, Damon. So basically, and I don't even know, James probably knows. I don't even know if Martine, you know. And by the way, just for the listeners, Martine, because he's like in the middle of a conference, is remote. And then James, Damon, and I are in the studio with the amazing tech team of women. So I just want to put that out there. So this is how it all started. So my lived experience is intimate partner violence. So that's my lived experience. That's also, I was working in domestic violence shelters for like 20 years, right? So I get to USC as faculty and I was, making statements that I've experienced domestic violence. And they said, hey, could you start meeting with students who've also experienced domestic violence who are interested in working in domestic violence shelters like you, basically to ensure that they're resourced. So when you become activated, which we all do, right? What resources do we have in place? So I said, sure. So I started talking with students who experienced domestic violence. Then they're like, hey, would you be comfortable talking with students who may have had felonies or misdemeanors about how to communicate their lived experience? And because basically what's happening is that they're interviewing for placements, for internships, and they're not being accepted. Either number one, they don't say anything because of the shame that they're used to receiving, right? So they're hoping it's not going to show up, and it always does. Or they'll whisper it after they're leaving the interview in this like awkward way. All right. So then I said, yeah, sure. Who have felonies or misdemeanors. Okay. So then I started meeting with students who were saying that they were formerly incarcerated. And I said, oh, wait, have you told anyone at USC? Do you need resources? Do you need support? What do you need? And they're like, hell no, we haven't told anyone. And yes, we need a lot of resources. So I said, oh, so this was November 2018. I said, hey, do you all want to meet each other? So again, there's no strategy, but it's relational. So do you want to meet each other and just connect? So 4 students from USC who were formerly incarcerated, they're like, yes. So we met and they're like, oh my God, let's just continue meeting as like peer support. Well, before the second meeting happened, Hector Martinez, who was one of those 4 students, died. And the other 3 students who knew him from that first meeting said, we need to keep going for Hector. So it continued as peer support. Now it changed into a movement of how to dismantle a lot of the collateral consequences of higher education. Obviously, the impact of carceral trauma, right, has now fueled the passion of students at USC Suzanne Dworak Peck School of Social Work to rise up to dismantle collateral consequences within education, which is how James and I met, because James is the chair of Unchained Scholars. And basically, that is my story of how I'm in the space.
No, that's a very powerful story because now it takes James, and now here's the intersection, because on the other side of it, and Martine, the thirst, the hunger to get more. Once you start the educational process, I can tell you, and then I love that Cellblock intellectualism. Martine, listen, when you start the process,
yeah, I like that.
Your world changes, right? It opens up these doors and possibilities about how you can make and affect change, right? It's not just standing there physically in front of someone who's holding you captive saying, we want this, we want that. No, it's like, no, I'm going to show you that I'll use my brain and whoop you, right? That's what go ahead, James.
Man, I mean, you couldn't say it any better than that. You know, as my story and my history, you know, it's like I'm an alumni, as I said, of Coastline Community College, right? My first associates was in social and behavioral science at Coastline. The problem is that when I was released into the community and I tried to use that to go into higher education, it wasn't good enough. Right. So I had to go back and earn a second associate's degree, which I did at Los Angeles City College, in Human Services Addiction Studies. And then from there, I ended up I actually applied to USC for undergrad and was rejected. And I was a little hurt, because I thought I could use my experiences, my lived experiences from being incarcerated for 28 years, growing up system impacted, being in Southern California. And I said, but you know what? I'm not going to give up. So I applied to California State University, Los Angeles, in the rehabilitation services major. While I was at the rehabilitation services major, I became the president of the Rehabilitation Counseling Association. During that process, I became more involved with volunteerism. I became more involved with higher education, to the point that when I did graduate, I graduated magna cum laude.
Amazing.
And earned a veteran's certificate in trauma-informed services.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
In trauma-informed services?
Yeah, from California State University, Los Angeles.
Wow.
Yeah. So through that process, I ended up applying to USC. But the backstory on that is I initially started contacting professors a year out because I knew I wanted to go to USC, but I wasn't quite sure if I could actually get there while I'm still on parole. So I reached out, through this interconnection, the intersectionality of education began to build within. And once I started this process of really pursuing higher education at USC, I wasn't ready to give it up. And so I was accepted. And when I was accepted into the to the Suzanne Dworak Peck School of Social Work, I was excited, and here I am, and here I sit, and being able to work with Susie, who I met about a year ago during the period of Denim Days, I do believe. And I didn't even know what Denim Days was until, or even what that represented, until I actually met up with Susie and other members of Unchained Scholars. And I was bought and sold right there. I wanted to be a part of this process, and lucky for me, I was able to be elected as the president now of the Unchained Scholars program, and through the nexus of higher education and Unchained Scholars, now I'm the co-host of Our Stories Matter, and we get to interview great people such as yourself and hear stories, and great co-hosts like Martine. And you're looking at Martine, in a million years, I would never imagine that he's a professor at Cal State San Marcos, Never in a million years.
That's what we're talking about.
Exactly.
Right? Changing the narrative.
The narrative and dismantling that stigma that follows us simply because we look a certain way, we have tattoos, we may have a unquestionable background, but that doesn't represent who we are in the moment, in the present. We all make poor choices and bad decisions at some point in our life. Most of us do. Some of us make greater severe choices that ends up landing us in incarceration, So now when we're out, and now when we're trying to fit it all into a sense of sensibility, into how I got here and where am I going, the one thing that we can actually draw from all of it is our lived experiences. Now, we don't have to be who we were, and we're always going to have what we did, on the shelf. of our consciousness. And we can either use that for a strength, or we can use that as something that's going to be turned to in a negative aspect. I choose to use that as a strength. I don't want to go back to where I came from. I just want to keep moving forward and help as many people as I can, you know. So that's my story. And this is why I'm here.
So as formerly incarcerated, and Martin, you can jump in at any time, we're going to direct this to Susie. I can tell you how I feel listening to this. I feel that for us to have someone who was not formerly incarcerated, who has the sympathetic ear, the empathetic compassion, what that means to us is everything. Because now we can start to grow and not feel stigmatized by other people judging us while we're in this transition. And the transition is just, right, it's right now, I'm in the midst of it, right? So I'm trying to put it all together. But knowing someone like you who has had these experiences but is listening to us, now I think that there is some definite, there's some jewels involved in that, if I can make this right. Let me see. There is something that's there that is different. We're on one side saying one thing, you're on the other side saying another thing, but we listen to each other, and now we can start to heal together, if that makes sense. Am I making sense? Martin, what do you think about that?
I think so. I think we need people like Susie and others to really start to dismantle what re-entry is, right? I know we talk about like prison, we've been incarcerated, and I think we need to focus a lot on re-entry. My thought is somebody like Susie and others need to dismantle this idea of re-entry, because society is asking us to re-enter back into society that marginalized us in the first place, right? And so we need to make it a better place for the folks coming home.
Okay, right? So the question I have for you is roadblocks, right? You just talked about society and the re-entry, right? There are roadblocks, right? And how do we dismantle those roadblocks? What is it? I know education is one way, but it's not the only way. So how do we dismantle those roadblocks? How do we take those down, right? Is it awareness? Tell me, James, we'll start with you, and then we'll go around and see what's going on.
You know, I think whenever we're confronted with roadblocks, you know, we have to, you know, first of all, we have to stop, exactly, just stop where we are in our tracks and just figure out, what am I looking at? What am I facing? You know, and just really check ourselves in the sense of, you know, what is my thinking at this time? You know, and how can my thinking move me into the next phase of where I want to be? So, for example, being on parole is a roadblock. For many people, being on parole, and you can't go more than 50 miles in the jurisdiction of where you are in parole. And if you have a crime victim in a county that's outside of your county, you can't go into that county. The ironic thing is that while I'm on parole, I had to get permission from the parole department so that I can attend the Nixon library for an extra credit project, because it's in Orange County. It's things like that. Bring a pause when we're trying to live a life of being a contributing member to society, show that we've transformed in our thinking, in our ideologies, in our processes. But the problem is that when you have the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation holding you down, putting their foot on your neck, so to speak, and just referring to you as simply a statistic, how can anybody move past that until they're able to reach that point to where they're actually off parole?
On the other side, Susie, what does that feel like to hear it from James?
Well, it's interesting because in addition to knowing James's story with parole and the Nixon library, which is outrageous, and then how much time do you have to wait till you get the response to be able to go to the library, from Forestry and Fire Recruitment Program, the co-founder, Brandon Smith, who was on, he was talking about how can you actually be a firefighter who is formerly incarcerated? You're in a fire. Now your parole officer calls and says, like, hey, you need to be in the office in 10 minutes. And he's in the middle of a wildfire. So it just, none of it makes sense. And I think a lot of people who have not been formerly incarcerated don't know all these consequences when you come home. Time done isn't really time done.
Hey, Martine, I have a question for you. I want to know about the internal motivation, right? I want you to talk a little bit about what motivated you to continue to pursue higher learning? Because there's something there more than just, I want to get an education, but there's something driving you. And I would just like you to expound on that a little bit. Can you do that for me?
Yeah, for sure. I wanted something different. I knew that going back to the streets was just going to end it back in prison. And I don't know. I just went to school, found a love for education, and followed it. I felt safe here, felt connected, and it's helped out so many people. One of the things I think about a lot, I worry about the people we left behind. The barriers for me or for James or for you, Damon, might be different than women, trans folks, gay folks, lesbian folks. The intersection we see in prison, they're coming home too. I feel like as a formerly incarcerated man, I need to keep the door open for all people. And that's my motivation. This works for me. I hope that I am able to give it away.
So I'm glad you said that, because I heard a couple things in there. I want to expound a little bit on it. You said love, right? Love is a big deal.
Yes.
Love for yourself, first of all, and then love for your fellow man. Somehow in prison, we lose the ability to be compassionate for other human beings. That's what happens, because the narrative is each one of us are against each other. And so now it goes back to the patriarchy, right? It goes back to toxic masculinity. What that means to us and how we viewed ourselves and how we bring that to the streets. When I mean outside of prison. So we come out of prison and now having this understanding or not having the understanding. And in the reentry process, the roadblocks you spoke of, when we're in prison, we're used to just going through the roadblocks. We don't care. Whatever the collateral damage is, who cares? We're going through, right? That's still that toxic masculinity. There's no empathy in that. There's no understanding in that. So now we become critical thinkers. Wow, let's stop, pause, because you use the term pause, James. Pausing for a minute, and I used to say in there, let's take a breath. The breath, everything comes back to. So when you pause and then you think about what is happening, now you can start to reevaluate what your position is and what you've done to create this. So in the reentry process, as we're moving forward, there is something there to say, I've identified the pain, right? There's pain in reentry, the roadblocks. How do we get around that as a collective? And what you do, Martine, and what you do, James, and Susie, all together, the intersection there is now starting to heal the pain, because we have to identify it, because too many times we don't talk about it. We don't talk about what's going on. We just drudge through it. But if I'm not laying out a pathway for someone to move forward, it's not going to work. So, and when I look at you and I look at James and I say, oh, there's someone who experienced what I experienced. And even when you bring in LGBTQ, you bring in that, because in prison, we know that that's a stigma. And so we don't talk about that. We alienate them inside our own community, inside prison. And it's more so abusive for the people there. But now that I found running a nonprofit, getting out of prison, of course I'm all inclusive. I'm never going to shun those people that we looked at negative in the past, because they're also suffering. And who am I to say I'm going to sub-segregate and only serve you because you are active, serve you because you're this?
Right.
You can't do that.
That's right.
We're all human. And so we have to come from that perspective. And there is the power in us, because now these societies are all intersecting. And to have a compassionate ear like Susie, now she's explaining to us what she sees from her perspective, and we're saying what we feel from our perspective. So there's vision and there's thought and there's hearing, and now there's healing in that connection.
And I'm also thinking, too, with all three of you, each one teach one.
Oh.
Yeah. So I think with Damon, I think of you and the Uncuffed Project. I think of James and being the president of Unchained Scholars. I think of Martine and all of your work with Project Rebound. I mean, you're all paying it forward. And it's pretty powerful. And I think, just in terms of folks who weren't formerly incarcerated, I'm thinking of like me, I saw a gap at USC. This is real. The students were saying they were not getting any support. There were no resources. They had told many professors that they were in need, and they said, yeah, that's rough. What? So I couldn't imagine. I was like, how is this happening? And then I wondered, like, sort of the imposter syndrome. I wasn't formerly incarcerated. How am I to even do any of this? So I sort of encourage folks who see a gap to do that. Whether it's in employment, it's in education, how do we dismantle questions on applications? But I just see what all three of you are doing is you're moving the needle by each one teach one. The leadership from you, from James, from Martine inside came outside. So it's not like you're three are different people, but you're fueling your passion in a different way.
The shoe would not allow any form of education, any form of degree earning program. You could go to, you can participate in Blackstone Career Institute if you paid for it by yourself, but any kind of Pell Grant program, any kind of bog fee waiver program, you're not being able to do that until after you've hit a type of mainline facility program. What do you think about that, Damon?
I think you're absolutely right. I'm a graduate of Blackstone, right?
As am I.
So that's a paralegal thing. So what happens is when you're oppressed and you're in an isolated situation, you want to figure out a way how you can get out of it. And the only way you can get out of it, in this case for me, was education. I need to understand what's being done to me. So the first thing I will request, there are things inside prison, are Title 15, which is the rules and regulations that they're governed by. So I wanted to fashion myself as a guy who understood the rules. So when I talk to them, I just present the rules. It's never about me and what I think. Hey, did you guys write this? This is your rule, right? Do I have this coming? And so that was my approach. They hate it because they're so far away from the rules that bringing them back to the center is a struggle. It's really a struggle.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
And as a life-term prisoner, we also realize that the more complaints you file against the Department of Corrections while you're trying to prepare for a parole board hearing, the worse it looks for you when you go to the board. Whether or not you're trying to do anything that's going to be adverse to the conditions of your confinement, it doesn't matter, because what happens is when you appear before the Board of Parole hearings, the fact is that you are now considered a troublemaker. Yeah. And if you're a troublemaker, you're going against the grain. So when you stand up for your rights and you use the administrative appeal process and you use the Title 15 in the way it's supposed to, and it keeps growing with new rules and new regulations, and as you become more familiar with that process, what you're ending up doing in the long term is basically saying, I'm too smart to be let out of prison.
Martine, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I would say one thing. You're not a troublemaker. You're a threat.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about that.
We get it. We get it. We know how to use what they give us against them.
Right.
They don't like it. And instead of looking at you as proactive, caring, or whatever, you become that threat. And it's just harder punishment on you.
Before we conclude with our episode, what I want to know is, what was it like for you, not only to tell your story, but also to interview us?
I love that question.
No, first of all, I feel like this is an honor and a pleasure to interview you, but also because I listen to Our Stories Matter, and I love when you guys have the people on and you're interviewing them, but I always want to know more about the person doing the interview, right? So this has been a treat for me because now I get to hear your voice about who you are and why we got here in this intersection, right? This is a blessing. And I appreciate the fact that you guys allow me to come here and then put you guys on the spot for a minute, right? tell me some stuff, right? Because I know that your audience is very curious, like I was curious, just about, more of the backstory. Really appreciate you guys bringing me down here and having a good time in LA. And you guys did a wonderful thing. And I'm glad that I got to be the person to ask you some of these questions, right? Because that's good. Thank you.
I am so glad that you're here. What would be a call to action for listeners in terms of, is education an equalizer? What can folks do?
You want me to start? Go ahead, Martine. You start this.
Yeah. You answer.
Come on, Doc. Let's roll.
Yeah.
No, I think it is. Actually, no, I know it is. Education will teach us about our history, where we come from, the war on drugs, mass incarceration, gangs. It'll teach us everything we need to know to change the outcome for others. Those of us who are closest to the problem, we're closest to the solution. And education gives us that.
Yes.
We're role models.
And piggybacking real quick, Carl Jung, he said, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm not what I was, I am what I will become. And I live by that motto, and so for people who are trying to reach out and try to identify what does it take to become transformed? Well, it's education. It's education. Every day that we're in our path, we're learning something. But when we're going into an institution of higher learning where there's people there that have walked the path before you and they're the experts, they know, how to teach. That's where it becomes important. Because like Susie said, each one teach one. So as we graduate, as we progress, as we transform, we do the same thing, with our voice. And that's what matters. Stand up and use your voice.
Yeah, so if I can surmise, well, both of you guys are eloquent. I appreciate what you said. So back to this educational arm and understanding the history of how we got here, right? History is so important because history does repeat itself and we ignore it. And when we ignore it, then we're saying basically we're doomed to repeat it. So what I'm saying is when you educate yourself on the history of how we got here, you're less likely to repeat it because I've seen this movie before, right? This is a repeat. And now we don't want to repeat that situation. We don't want to commit the vicious cycle. We don't want to have these. So we understand. And when we understand, education seems to be, and I believe this, the pathway to real freedom. Because like my mother would say, when you have an education, no one can take it from you, right? That is yours. That is the only thing that's yours, right? So, and everything else is always a collective or a community, but your education is yours and yours alone. I think moving forward, when we empower and embody the community, not just ourselves, but the people we touch and impact, we tell our stories and we say things to them like, this is what's happening. Now you've empowered someone else to, and I can say this, in California specifically, everyone knows someone who is affected by the criminal justice system.
Right.
It doesn't matter if it's not your brother, your sister, but you know someone. And when you know that something, what are you willing to do to change the narrative if you watch them struggle?
But check out Nomad, which is Damon backwards.
Right. So it's on the uncuffedproject.org. And I released the film there. It's a documentary. And stay tuned for Nomad 2, which is the journey after incarceration.
Yes.
Great job. Great job.
Thank you, guys.
Our Stories Matter is brought to you by Trauma Informed Los Angeles. We want to thank Homeboy Industries and the Forestry and Fire Recruitment Program for sharing their experiences and opening their doors and hearts to us. Thank you also to Fabian Dworak for allowing us to record at Homeboy's Art Academy. Thank you also to the University of Southern California Good Neighbors. And thank you to Yehuda Price for composing our original music while incarcerated. Thank you, Ivan Reyes, our amazing editor. Please consider giving us a review with a 5-star shout out. Subscribe to Our Stories Matter wherever you get your podcasts. Join our trauma-informed Los Angeles community at traumainformedla.org. Please go to our website to read the full bios and credits. And stay tuned for more Our Stories Matter.
We would like to take a moment to acknowledge the original stewards of the land where our event takes place today. Trauma Informed Los Angeles acknowledges the Gabrielino Tongva people as the traditional land caretakers of the Tavangar, which today is the Los Angeles Basin and Channel Islands. We are committed to uplifting the names and community members of these lands and across the nation who reside alongside us. We also want to acknowledge the suffering and forced unpaid labor of enslaved Africans and African Americans, which enabled the start of this country.